U.S. travel boycotts are here, as tourists from countries that Trump has targeted with his tariffs are simply not interested in visiting this country anymore.
Something we have not talked about on this broadcast at all. You talk to folks in the travel industry, folks that that are involved in airlines, in hotels, and everything else. This trade war is going to turn into something broader than just a trade war. People in other countries are not coming to the United States the way they used to. You are going to see travel drop. Foreigners saying, we don't like these people, literally. And I think that that has an economic impact, but has a much broader, more profound impact that has not even been sort of calculated in what's going on here.
I actually went to a wedding over the weekend and there were a couple of Canadians there. So naturally, I asked them about what it was like crossing the border. I think they had driven through the Buffalo Niagara Falls border crossing. And I personally have crossed the border, that particular border, many times in my life. I've seen Niagara Falls more times than most people probably have. It's always usually an easy crossing, but it can definitely get backed up with traffic. It's good to budget at least a couple of hours for the crossing alone, but this time, this Canadian couple said that they breezed through it in that there weren't nearly as many cars there as they're used to seeing, and they said that talk around their parts was that Canadians just don't want to come here and they don't want to spend their money here anymore. Canadians in particular, they used to vacation here often, both in the American South where they could escape the harsh Canadian winters and in parts of the northern US where they could find a quick, quaint weekend getaway. Now, portions of the country, especially New England, are bracing for a drop in tourism revenue from Canadians specifically.
I am here today to say to Canadians to avoid travel to the United States if at all possible, and to call our government to stand up for our Canadian citizens who are being denied their rights by arbitrary detention in the United States today. Canada must stand up for our citizens and for the rule of law.
There is, of course, data to support this, though. For one, our own government has noted a decline in overseas traffic into the United States. According to data from the National Travel and Tourism Office, overseas to U.S. travel has declined 11.6% in March compared to the previous year. And according to data from Trivago, the hotel/travel site, the U.S. is seeing fewer bookings than usual from Canada, Japan, Mexico, and Germany. But how significant are these Trivago findings? This is reporting from The Guardian. The company has seen double-digit percentage declines in bookings to the United States from travelers based in Japan, Canada, and Mexico. The latter two countries were the first on Trump's tariff hit list when he announced tariffs of 25% on 1 February. Also, demand among Germans was also down heavily, with hotel bookings in the US showing a single-digit percentage decline. Germany is the largest economy in the EU, which Trump has repeatedly threatened with increased tariffs, most recently saying on Sunday he had paused a 50% tax he intended to introduce next month. Tourism in the US is a $2.6 trillion industry, but businesses that depend on tourism are anticipating what they're calling a Trump slump, which is exactly what it sounds like, but I do love that they're putting his name on it, by the way. And that slump isn't just from fewer people that are coming here. Travelers within the United States are also spending less. And I don't just mean that they're shopping less. There's now more demand for cheaper hotels, with travelers more willing to stay at lower-starred hotels in their efforts to pay less overall. As for the UK, travelers from the UK and the US are choosing to vacation domestically due to concern and uncertainty over leaving the country. But booking data now shows that the UK is seeing a 25% year-over-year increase in demand for domestic summer travel, with people particularly interested in vacationing in London and Edinburgh. Both of those cities are seeing a near 30% increase in travel demand, but York, Blackpool, and Manchester have also seen boosts. To explain this, Trivago's chief executive Johannes Thomas put it simply, in times of uncertainty, people stay closer to home. And I'll admit that I am a little hesitant to leave the country right now. I don't necessarily think that anything will happen if I do, but the fact is, nobody knows what can or will happen right now. This administration administration hardly seems to know what it's doing, and it seems incapable of communicating within itself, let alone with the public. Although when I was going through TSA this last time, there is now a fun video that loops of Kristi Noem talking about the real ID or something. I'm not really sure what she was saying because I didn't watch the video long enough to read all the subtitles, but she's definitely made sure that her presence is felt at airport security. Honestly, the video sort of felt like AI, or like in the Harry Potter movies where the pictures move, but I guess that's not really relevant. Anyway, business travel is similarly being affected by the tariffs. This from Politico. Data shared with Politico by London-based Hotel Hub, a platform specialized in the business travel sector, found that bookings in April were down by 26% from a year ago. That comes as the US is seeing a marked deterioration in its reputation. Trump has unleashed a global trade war and is attacking traditional US allies, while social media is filled with stories of travelers being mistreated while trying to enter the country. Hotel Hub's chief commercial officer explained, "There's been a lot of uncertainty around the traditional partnership with the US since the new administration took office, and even more so since the tariff announcements. The Trump tariffs seem to have created an appetite for businesses to look at alternative markets to offer greater stability." How embarrassing for us. The United States was once considered an incredibly safe and stable place to do business, which is why so many businesses would operate here or at least partner with American businesses. Trump's tariffs have thrown all of that into a lurch while promising that it'll all be worth it eventually. On top of that, our national debt is so out of control that our national credit rating has been downgraded, not just because of our growing debt, which by the way is currently at around $36 trillion, but also because of our government's inability to manage that debt. We have leadership so incompetent that international agencies that are not afraid of Trump backlash are calling it out for what it is. And if it's not incompetent, then they're malicious in their efforts to tank our business reputation internationally. One might feel worse than the other, but functionally the end result is the same. A decline in international travel, whether for business or pleasure, is a sad state of affairs. Americans are already notorious for not traveling much outside of our own borders. It's not unusual to find Americans who have never left their own state, and it's certainly not unusual to find Americans without passports. It's estimated that only 45 to 50% of Americans have one, which means over half of us don't leave the country regularly and or don't plan to do so anytime soon. We also have a bad reputation for being ignorant of other nations and cultures, and the two things can't possibly be unrelated. Granted, there is a geographic component to all of this. It's much easier and cheaper for Europeans, for example, to visit another country than it is for Americans to do so. We also like to visit other countries by just staying at American-run resorts once we get there, which hardly, in my opinion, counts as immersing oneself in another culture. But Pew Research found that Americans who have traveled internationally stand out in their views and knowledge of foreign affairs. Polling from 2023 found that Americans who have traveled widely abroad, 5 or more countries, have greater interest in foreign affairs, and also that they prioritize U.S. engagement in world affairs, including valuing compromise with other nations, even though compromise means making sacrifices on our part to take the interests of other countries into account. In other words, people who travel internationally tend to be less individualistic than those who don't, less America first. So one can only assume that this particular administration is not mad about the fact that Americans who already don't travel very much are traveling even less now. However, for an administration that's supposed to be so good at business and running this country like a business, they don't seem too concerned about tanking entire trillion-dollar industries. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.